we have this opportunity to update you as members of the media and also the country at large on what we are doing at the Ministry of Trade and Industry. Because as the Deputy Minister indicated, trade and industry are two sides of the same coin. And I'm not aware of any country in the world that has achieved superlative growth which has not been anchored on either the trade or the industrial sector. None. So as a country, if we are serious about achieving that level of excellence and the superlative growth that I'm talking about, the answer is not too far away. It's about what you do with the trade and industrial sector. Let me very quickly go through the outline of the presentation. There's an introduction, and the introduction is not for cosmetic purposes. It is going to be brief, but it's supposed to provide a strategic framework within which we are executing our industrial development agenda. And then after that, I've picked just 3 of the components of this strategic framework, just for purposes of further elaboration. Maybe you should invite me for another series where I'll go through all the rest of the place. I think that would be very important. But be that as it may, let me start first by articulating the vision that we have in the ministry. Our vision is to make Ghana the new manufacturing hub of Africa. And within this context, the ministry is implementing a comprehensive and integrated program of industrial transformation, which arguably, and I'm choosing my words carefully, is the most comprehensive program for industrial transformation since independence. I recognize that during the first regime that a lot was done by way of industrial activity. But if we examine the substance and content of what we are doing now, I think you would agree with me that this is the most comprehensive industrial program since independence. And this transformation program is anchored on 10 pillars. And it's aimed at 2 things: economic growth and 3 things: economic growth, economic diversification, and then job creation. Now, the 10-point plan for industrial transformation is composed of the following: the famous one district, one factory initiative. And interestingly, I think I was in India about maybe a year ago, and India was now talking about one district, one factory. So for once, the big boys are also copying from us. So that's the first component. And this is meant to promote rural industrialization and add value to the natural resource endowment of each district. If you look at the industrial landscape of our country, everything is either in Accra, and to a very limited extent in maybe Kumasi. But how can you industrialize when the scope of your activity is so huge? I don't think that qualifies, a country to become industrialized. So it's a very deliberate program to decentralize industrialization and to bring industry to the doorstep of the average Ghanaian. So it's not a political gig. And when Angela Merkel, the Chancellor of Germany, when she visited, she wanted to know how she could participate in the one factory initiative. The United States of America, Secretary Ross, that's my counterpart. The first thing that he talked about in terms of trade and investment relations with Ghana is they want to be part of the One District, One Factory program. And that is why the U.S. Exim Bank, as I'm sure you are aware, has recently underwritten a $300 million facility from U.S. Exim to support the export of machinery and equipment from the United States. So that's the One District, One Factory. The second one is the National Industrial Revitalization Program. What this is meant to do is to provide financial, technical, other services for local companies that are distressed, but which are deemed to be potentially viable. To set up new factories, that's a great idea. But you have to recognize that there are existing factories, existing companies. These are low-hanging fruits. And once you aim at starting ones, what do you do about the existing ones? As long as they are not pathologically dead and they can be resurrected, I think, in fact, that is the starting point. And these are local companies. So this is very important for us. Then the third is the Strategic Anchor Industrial Initiatives. This is developing new growth poles for economic diversification. It is an indictment on all of us as Ghanaians that for over a century, we have not been able to think beyond cocoa and gold. It's amazing. So if people in Europe and on the continent stop eating chocolates, what happens to our cocoa industry? And there's so much potential as to how we've not been able to identify any other growth pillars for our economy. It's amazing. But this time it's going to happen. And that's the value of these new strategic anchor initiatives. Number 4, one region, one park. All this miracle about Asia, the Asian tigers, the key, one of the critical components of the transformation of Asia was the establishment of industrial parks. Because what you do with an industrial park is that you create an enclave, provide an ecosystem that allows companies to survive. We don't want investors going around looking for land and land which is under litigation. So once you have an industrial enclave, then it's a ready-to-go enclave for companies to locate. And under this program, government is supporting the private sector, and I'm choosing my words very carefully. When you talk about government support private sector, people want to transform that. Government says they do this. So please note my words very carefully. We are supporting the private sector to develop these industrial parks and special economic zones, one for each region of our country. The fifth one is the development of small and medium enterprises. The SME sector is the backbone of every economy. Even in Germany, 85 to 90% of the companies are SMEs. Facebook, Uber, they all started as SMEs. And you go to into their financial statements, you would appreciate that you start small, but then you can grow big. So SMEs are still very important for us. And the institutional support that you need to make SMEs grow is probably what has been lacking in this country. People don't realize that even in the most liberalized economy in the world, is the United States, the Small Business Administration, which is equivalent to the MBSI in Ghana, is one of the most heavily funded agencies. The agency that supports small and medium enterprises in the United States is one of the most heavily funded agencies, and is one of the few public sector agencies that has a head reporting directly to the president. So you can see how important it is. I'm watching to see, maybe now that I started talking about this, maybe why can't I also report to the president? It doesn't work like that. You have to crawl before you get to that. Yes. So SMEs are very important. The sixth component is what we call industrial subcontract. If you go to Japan, 90 to 95% of all commercial transactions are done through subcontracting. Large companies subcontracting to small companies. So that's how you integrate SMEs into the value chain in the whole economy. KFC. Those of you like KFC, you know that KFC literally has to import every single piece of chicken into this country. Every single piece of chicken. It is not as if they do not want to buy local chicken. But unless you develop the capacity to supply in terms of consistency of supply and the quality, consistency of quality, as the Americans will say, it ain't going to happen. He's not going to predicate the success of his company just on the platform of we want local participation. And so it is not going to happen by chance. The government has to have a deliberate policy of growing these SMEs to fit into the supply chain of these companies. So this is beyond one district, one factory. There's nothing to do with one region, one park. That subcontracting program alone can even transform this country. And that is why it's a major part of what we are doing. Then the seventh one is export development. This is the only country where you want to stabilize your currency and you don't want to hear about exports. All these major countries that have strong currency, the only way you can support your local currency is to increase your supply of forex. And the only way you can have an increased supply of forex is to export. You know? So it is absolutely critical for us to start thinking about exports. But that is what is going to underpin our economy. And we have so many opportunities now. I'm sure most of you have heard about this new development in Africa. For the first time in the history of our continent, Africa has now become a single market. And this is the Continental Free Trade Area, which has legally come into force now. In March 2018, 52 countries have executed this agreement to create this free trade area. But by law, you need 22 countries out of this number to ratify the agreement for it to come into force. Last week, the 22nd country ratified the agreement. So legally now, Africa has one single market. And probably that is why Africa has been growing. Because the fragmented nature and small size of our markets has been a major part of the challenge for Africa. Now that we have a single continental market of 1.2 billion consumers with a combined GDP of 35 trillion US dollars, this is the most significant development in the history of Africa since the Organization for African Unity was established. It means that now if you set up a facility, a production facility in Ghana, you can produce and export duty-free and quota-free to the whole of Africa. So you see Casapreco now does not need to depend only on Nigeria. There are people in Zimbabwe, Zambia, who are looking for alomo bitters. And because there is no arrangement for them even to know that this is available in a sister country, we are not exploring that opportunity. So the CFTA alone, and incidentally, Ghana is in a pole position. We've submitted a bid to host the secretariat of the CFTA. And you should all pray that the headquarters of the secretariat comes to Ghana. I will have to start auditing your prayers to see whether... Yes. So if it's come, it will be a major achievement for us. There's ECOWAS. 360 million people. Mr. Kofi Juma, who is the chief executive of Gihog Distilleries, super quality products. I mean, literally, he doesn't even need to survive on the Ghanaian market with the kind of products that they are producing. But it is about Ghana understanding the value of exports. If we understand the value of exports, this country will go far. There's the Economic Partnership Agreement, EPA. Yes, I know we have challenges with the EPA. But the point is that the EPA is opening up the market of Europe, duty-free, quota-free, to Africa, including Ghana. So you can imagine if we took advantage of the European market. Of course, it will not happen by chance. You have to have the right product at the right price and to supply the right time. And then that's it for you to take advantage. Europe is big, but the more interesting one is the U.S. market. And under AGUA, we can supply 6,500 products duty-free, quota-free to the United States market. What are we doing about that? So basically, and there are new emerging markets. China alone, if you got one product into China, my brother, your party is now going to become a thing of the past. So let's look at this very carefully. Whilst I'm talking so enthusiastically about exports, every country survives first in their domestic market. But if you look at the nature of our domestic retail market, people, I don't have to describe that to you. You know what happens? Is this the kind of domestic market regime that can promote made in Ghana goods? Obviously, if we are serious about supporting our local industries, then we have to reform our domestic market retail infrastructure. All the outbreaks, you know. I can tell you, if we did only that and build new market centers, I mean, I'm talking about real market centers, you see the effect and the impact on promoting made in Ghana goods, even if we're not exporting. Now, all this is important, but the point is that it requires investments, whether it's local or domestic. Now, for business people to put their money into this country, whether they are Ghanaians or non-Ghanaians, they need an environment that is supportive and attractive to make them risk their capital. And that is why you can do 1D, 1F, you can do all these, but unless you have a business regulatory environment that is supportive of private business, it ain't going to happen. And that is why we are also aggressively pursuing. And Madam Minister, is not here. I can spend 1 full hour on the business regulatory reform. You know, so what I'm doing here is just light work. And I need to come back. I've given you 10 things. I need 1 hour for each of them. And you'd appreciate what we are talking about. And the last one, which is the icing on the cake, is that government does not create jobs by itself. Yes, government employs people. But how many people do we employ? 600,000 people. Do you know the number of people in the job market? 13 million people. And it is growing every year. 300,000 grad students from tertiary institutions come into the market every year. So if the private sector is not investing, the public sector, this 600,000, we are not sure whether we can even increase it. It means the answer to the creation of jobs does not lie in government. It lies with the private sector. That's why all this talk in Ghana should be about how do we support the private sector to invest. And you want to support the private sector, you have to talk to them. It's not about you as a minister sitting in your office and issuing policies and guidelines for the private sector. Yes, it's your responsibility to do policy. But the people who are going to reach their capital, they have to be part of that policy formulation process. And it cannot be by chance. So we are introducing an institutionalized platform for the government to engage with the private sector. I think this is very... So all these templates, I talk to people, they say, oh, but these are lots of things you want to do. You tell me which of them should I remove? Which of these 10 things do you want us to... so that's why we have a very ambitious program. We are proud of it. This is what is going to take Ghana to the promised land. And so, as I said, for purposes of this meet the press session, I'll concentrate on only 3 of them. And then I'll come back next time. 1 hour for each pillar. The one district, one factory, I know with this is something that the media, this is something that they are very much interested in. As I said, it's a major part of our program, and it is supposed to support the establishment of at least 1 industrial enterprise each of the 260 districts. But, you know, there are a lot of misconceptions about this one district, one factory, and I want to use this opportunity to clarify some of them. Number 1, this is not about government setting up state enterprises. Please. It is about government supporting the private sector to establish enterprises at the district level. It is private sector led but facilitated by government. I want us to put this beyond doubt. Now, the other thing is that you can have 2 or more districts that want to collaborate, establish one factory, because they may have a common resource endowment. So, from a branding or packaging point of view, you see, we are talking about one district, one factory. Because we want to deny any district of benefiting from the program. But if 2 districts believe that it is in their common interest to establish one factory, why not? Also, an existing enterprise that meets the required criteria that we've set can also qualify under the one factory. So it does not mean that because we want to set up factories in districts, that if somebody has already taken the lead, that you should not rope them in. Because that's exactly what you want to do. But they've taken the lead. So these are low-hanging fruits. Support them. And basically you achieve the same goal. Some of our friends, you know, on the other side, but this is an existing factory. You are now talking about this is one factory that the company was already operating. Why not? I wish that we could have even half of them already as existing factories, and then we support them so that they can achieve the objectives that we are looking for. And then we also recognize that in some districts where I would say they have challenges, that they are vulnerable, that it might not be possible for you to identify promoters who want to go and set up. I won't mention any district before I get into trouble. Now, in such situations, government can intervene directly and set up and incubate the project. And once we show the light, it will become interesting for a promoter from maybe another district now to that. But if this can work, then why not? They may come in. Then last but not the least, the size of each project is determined by the promoter based on the business plan for the project. Now, status of implementation. So currently, I think at the last time that I had a public outing, we talked about 79 projects at various stages of implementation, 79. Now, for purposes of clarification, this 79 is made up of 57 companies that are currently in operation, and then 22 projects that are under construction. So that's where you get the 79 from. But people don't realize that if you start counting projects that are already on the ground, then you are only short-changing yourself, because you may have others that are in the pipeline that you should also talk about, because it encourages people that there's something happening. So beyond this same time, we have projects that are ready to commence implementation before the end of the year. Now, these are being financed by local participating banks, and we've been working with about 6 or 7 banks. So they've gone through their credit appraisal process, and we know that by the end of the year, at least another 33 would have then graduated from the banks, and then they would have started implementation. In addition to that, we realize that in some districts, in some communities, you may have an abundance of, let's say, agricultural commodities. It's not that you are now going to farm these products. It's already there, watermelon, oranges. In this case, our view and our proposal has been that let us bring in smaller processing plants. Now, these smaller processing plants at least can reduce the post-harvest losses and mop up some of the existing raw material, so that you don't need to start actually developing plantations. So under this category, we have 56 projects that are ready to commence implementation before the end of the year 2019. But the interesting thing is that we don't want to leave the youth of this country of this 1D, 1F program. So under this particular component, what we've said is that we want the youth not only to be working for business promoters as employees, we want them all to become owners of these 1D, 1F enterprises. And to start them off, each of these 56 districts, we are going to put together groups of tertiary graduates, maybe 50 of them in a particular group. And we are going to corporatize them. We create a company for them, and then they will have a grant to buy the processing equipment which they will use in processing for the particular. So already means that in each of these groups, you have groups of youth who are roaming about, nothing doing, who will now own their own factory. And then basically from there, they can start doing bigger things. At least $200,000 for each of these processing. That's not a bad start, is it? So I think the youth will become mainstream participants. Then in addition to that, we also realize that there are farmers. You go to some communities, they are producing rice. Now, if there are no processing facilities, it means that basically they are handicapped. So we're setting up what we call common user processing facilities. This is being financed by ADB, the African Development Bank. So these farmers, like the graduates, are now also going to own these processing plants. So you bring them together, and they will now become the owners of the processing plant. But this will be much bigger, $2 million plus for the group of farmers. So it is not about farmers just supplying raw material or becoming employees. They are now actually also going to become owners of these companies. And then there's a last category. I think we've talked about this before. We've been working with some major Chinese banks who have already earmarked $400 million to support one factory. But these are large-scale flagship projects. We have small, we have medium, and we have large scale. And already we are targeting 22 of these large projects financed by the Chinese. But by the end of the year, 8 of them would have at least started implementation. Now, let me do this, otherwise I might take the whole day. Now, 1D, 1F projects that are new, excuse me, there's no view, you know. So, you remember I said if you're an existing company, you can still participate in the 1D, 1F. So, 1DF, out of the 181, 1D, 1F companies that were already in existence, that's 52. And those that are new, that's their new creation, that's 129. So that's how you get your total. And very quickly, we have, I hope it's coming. Yes. So 1D, 1F projects by region and by districts. You can see the comparison. Please, this is not a league table. Don't start reading into it. I mean, but this one is 43. Why am I? Yeah. Go and find promoters that will be interested in working with you in your districts. So this is not about government dictating anything. We are just capturing the results of what we are seeing on the ground. I think if you see it in a bar chart form, it's even more interesting. So you find that the blue bar indicates the number of districts in that region. So you have Ashanti, and then you can see 23 districts out of the 43 are already involved in the project. So you would find that, let's say Oti being new region, you can see that they have 8 districts, and then so far it's only 1, and so on and so forth. I think this also gives you a good graphic representation of what is. Now, these 1F projects come from different sectors. So here also we have a sectoral distribution. You can see that agro-process, understandably so, it's 56%. And then the next largest piece, it's primary agriculture, 22%. And we are pleased with that because it's the linkage between the primary agriculture and then the processing. So very soon, the 22, some of them will move to the agro-processing because they would have had factories. And then you find that there are other sectors. Now, people always ask, yes, this is private sector-led, but government facilitated. What is government actually doing to support them? I know this question always comes back. Number one, facilitation of access to credit. As a government, we know that Mr. A has not told us that he wants to build a factory in Bunkugu. You, as government, you want to spread industrialization. So you have to be able to provide some incentives. And one of it is we facilitate access to credit. So we work with a number of banks, and we are advocates for these companies to provide credit, not only from local banks, but international financial institutions. There's also an interest rate subsidy. We know that the cost of capital is still very high in Ghana. And so currently what we've been able to negotiate with government funding support is that 1D, 1F companies would enjoy a subsidy that would effectively deliver credit to them at not more than 10%, 10% per annum, as against the 25% there. Isn't that a material benefit? It's not? It is, yes. Now, apart from that also, there are tax and non-tax incentives. And this is government, you know, there's a cost to incentives. So when government is providing all these incentives, I think it is fair that we acknowledge that this government supporting the private sector. And I'll show you one slide which lists out all these tax incentives. And then also, interestingly, every 1F company is assigned 2 consultants, very experienced people. One to help you with the operational management, and the other one with financial management. So as soon as you become accredited, you have 2 consultants, experienced people who are almost like an extension of your staff. And they work with you right from the beginning until you decide that, look, now you have weaned yourself and you don't need the support of those consultants. So that's a material support. Very quickly, the tax and non-tax incentives. This has been approved by Cabinet, and also on last Friday it's been approved by Parliament. So corporate tax, 5 years tax holiday. 1D, 1F companies would enjoy exemption from import duty taxes and local levies on equipment, machinery, and parts. The same exemptions for all raw materials that are imported by 1D1F companies. And then you have exemptions from payment of withholding taxes. What better testimony can we have of government's commitment to this work than having these incentives? So if you are serious and you are a businessman or not even a businessman, you want to join the one, these are incentives that would make your project viable right from the start. Now we go beyond these tax incentives. There are also non-tax incentives, repatriation of dividends, because we believe that, yes, we can encourage foreign investors also to team up with local companies. So please, if you don't have anything that you are thinking about, let's see how I can help you get a joint venture partner. And then with this incentive, maybe this is also your path towards prosperity. Not sitting there and complaining, we don't see the government here. These opportunities for you, but you have to be aggressive, find these partners, we can facilitate that, and then you'll be on your way to paradise. Now, so these are non-fiscal incentives. Also, if in case you have a foreign partner and they are worried, but this is one government, when the new government comes in, but this is the difference. This is not a government enterprise. So the issue of nationalization or one government to say that I will cancel one deal, you cannot cancel it because it's not your enterprise. These are private sector promoters. Please take note of that. And so once you are teaming up with a foreign partner, you can guarantee that it will not be expropriated or nationalized. And of course, there are quotas for expatriate workers. Now, another support that government is providing is actually helping you to sell your goods. And not only on the domestic market, but also in the export markets that we've heard about. So we are shepherding you from the start to the finish. And it's almost like hand-holding. All you need is you get a job and they will support you. And then also, as a market policy, the government, the president is very keen about this, instructed that where government procurement is involved, and there's a 1D1F company that is producing that must go to the 1D1F company. And I think this is very significant. Now, beyond that, government is also supporting, this is at the central level. Now, at the district level, so I'm not sitting in Accra as minister and then just directing like an orchestra conductor. No, it don't work that way. You have 260 districts. You cannot sit in Accra, think that you can. So there are central level incentives, but at the district level, it's even more profound. So in every district, we have a district level implementation support team, which is chaired by DCE, the district planning officer, the district engineer. All of them are involved. What they are supposed to do is do everything that is right to make the company succeed. Because if the company succeeds, it's your district that is benefiting from it. So this district implementation support team is at the district level, hands-on support. And part of what they are supposed to do is facilitate access to land, energy, roads. So if District A has a company, then in your annual district economic development plan, if you know that your company needs an access route, you have to program for it in your budget. So this is also part of government support. And in addition to that, you can see all the things I'm talking about. It should signal one thing to you, that there's now going to be a lot of activity, economic activity at the district level. And we don't want to throw them into the districts without any support. So under the Rural Enterprises Program, we are establishing what we call Business Resource Centers, BRCs. And hopefully this is going to be a one-stop enterprise support center which will provide a full range of services to these companies. So GIP registration, VAT registration, Registrar Generals, everything that you need from a government department, you will get it at the Business Resource Center. And later on you see that these are not Mickey Mouse centers, full-fledged support centers managed by very competent business advisors. And they will provide all kinds of support for these one kind of companies. Then we also realize that, so you can see all the services from training to access to financial services, access to local markets. So these BRCs will do that. Now we also realize, if you've run a factory before, you know that sometimes the whole factory operation can come to a stop because there's a small part that is missing, and you need to come to Accra or Kumasi to be able to get that part. Or you don't even have a maintenance plan, or you need some new equipment that can support your operation. In addition to the BRCs, we also have, now let me say that, I've seen that Kosi is looking at me now. So the BRCs operate under the NBSI, which is now going to be transformed into the Enterprise Ghana Agency. The enterprise, so you find that these are new generation. Now, there are technology solutions. You may have heard of rural technology facilities. Now, I've rebranded them. These are going to be technology solution centers. So whilst the BRCs are supporting the companies on the business side, the technology solution centers are supporting them on the technology side. And it's very, very important. So current status, we have 30, there are a lot of things happening in this country, but the point is not just to be talking. Once the hand is there, the people there, they know what is happening on the ground. Now we have 37 BRCs across the country that are at various stages of implementation. We have an additional 30 BRCs which are at the design stage. So very soon the exercise will be completed for the construction to start. And then the technology solution centers, there are already 31 of them at various stages of completion. This is under the Rural Enterprises Program. We have 240 million Ghana cedis already invested in BRCs and the technology solution centers. So you can see some of these new BRCs under construction. The president was kind enough to open the Business Resource Center as real. So you can see that, as I said, these are not Mickey Mouse centers. Then you have the technology solution centers that are being built. Maybe sometimes just break the trend. If I don't know whether the video can show, but let's see whether. Yes. So this is just a typical. So you know that it's not Alan who is just talking, for the press to capture. I mean, the president has commissioned. I tell you. This sweet potato. Some people don't to clap. You want to see more. This is not a film show. It's not a cinema event. Okay. So I think that to save time, just to save time, you haven't paid your ticket for the cinema. So, yeah. You know, this company produces spare parts for articulated vehicles. And can you imagine that Chad, Niger, Mali, all the articulated truck parts and things like that, this man is supplying. He exports like literally 90% of his products to, you know. So a lot of things are. Let's continue. So now I talked about 3 of the best that we are going to discuss. One district, one factory. We finished with that for the meantime. Let's move on to the second one. I'll make it very quick. That's the one region, one park. Oh, it cannot be stopped. Okay, let it roll. I'm going to take too much. This is for a brick and tile factory. Yeah. Okay, all right, so they've stopped, yes. So the second pillar, not necessarily in any order of importance, is the one region, one park initiative. I've talked to you about what industrial parks, the role they've played in this so-called Middle of Asia. And already in Ghana, it's at least giving every region opportunity to have an industrial park. So if you look at, yes, okay, good. So you find that, so there are 9 parks in 4 regions, 9 parks in 4 regions, and they are all listed there. Yes. Now, it means that there are still some regions that need support. But again, we don't want it to be government investing alone in these industrial parks. But we work and support them. So all the off-site infrastructure, as much as possible, we will provide that, and then it will help them also to. Now, I will just talk very briefly about one of them, just one of them. At the next session, I'll talk about the others. Now, in the Ashanti region, the industrial park in the Ashanti region is being elevated to the status of an industrial city, if you like, a mini Tema, an industrial city and special economic zone. Because the interesting thing about Ashanti is that it connects about 4 or 5 regions. And at the same time, it is the gateway to all the Sahelian countries, Niger, Burkina, Mali, you know. So it is a very important strategic location if we really want to open up our country. And that is why, yes, in the case of Ashanti, it is larger than just a park. And it is, I would say that it's a city because there are different parks within the city. So you've heard about the Buankra inland port. So the inland port is within the industrial city. You see, the concept of an inland port is good. But an inland port which operates as a post office, as a transit, is not going to make any money. But if you around the inland port, if you develop an industrial enclave, they are talking. And that is why now we have a much better thing around the area. So you have an inland port, you have a transportation and logistics hub. Of course, you need an admin and management office complex. We have a shopping mall, commercial center. And then there's going to be a biopharmaceutical park. A pharmaceutical park, because again, we want Ghana to become the new pharmaceutical industrial let's say, nation, at least in Africa. And then, of course, there are hotels and restaurants. Then there's a financial services center. And then a convention and exhibition center, a business incubator for startups, and then also a technology and innovation park, an education and learning resource center. You know the University of Science and Technology, Kumasi Polytechnic, all these very productive institutions of higher learning, Swami Magazine, all those resources, the infrastructure there, need to be able to upgrade them. And so you have, as part of the city, you have the education and learning center. And of course, you need a residential enclave, leisure and entertainment park, an eco-village, because this is a new settlement where the number of people are co-locating there. I mean, obviously, you have to be able to provide that. There's the food and beverage manufacturing. Already, Crab Brewery is going to establish one of their biggest plants in West Africa, or even without groundbreaking, already they've made a commitment. So this is not just talking about dream of, having that industrial plant. So that's food and beverage. Then the auto manufacturing park within that city. And then have a furniture city. I mean, those of you understand that Ashanti region has that resource of lumber and wood. This is the right. So by the time you go to the furniture city, you will see a real enclave, of high quality furniture. And then mineral processing, gold. That is really where the anchor is. So you have a gold city. And then aeronautical maintenance center. I'm sure we'll be competing with some other region, maybe Accra, Greater Accra, but we'll see how it goes. Because it's all one country, and we want to be able to spread. Yeah. Then machinery and equipment manufacturing. You're talking about every district having one enterprise, industrial enterprise. Why do you want to import all the machinery, even from boilers to packaging equipment and things like that? So here, we will be able to produce some of the machinery and equipment. And then last but not the least, steel factories in Ghana, they are all located in Tema. They are all located in Tema. So there will be one or two there, and then we are also thinking that we'll compete, this will compete with other regions for an aluminium refinery in the center. So this was just to give you one example of the one region, one park. So you can see that a lot is happening. That's a graphic representation of that. And the interesting thing is that even the new regions, and people have to be active, because this is not just government creating it. It is private sector then supported by government. So, Kofi, I know OT is close to your heart, so you better sit up. The third one, then I'll bring my presentation to a close, is these strategic anchor industries. I talked about the fact that cocoa has served Ghana. We have to be able to move beyond that. So we've identified a number of strategic anchor industries. The evidence is clear. Integrated bauxite and aluminium industry. I'm sure you're aware that government has already established an authority to provide strategic guidance for the development of this. Iron and steel, again, this is in Parliament, another authority to guide the development of the iron and steel industry. Then the petrochemical industry. Right now, we are just exporting our oil and gas. And this is the problem with Africa. We can get 10 times the value of what we are getting from oil and gas now if we develop the downstream petrochemical industry. That's where the plastics come from, bitumen, fertilizer, all these things. So if you have aluminium, you have steel, and you have plastics, this is the beginning of a real vibrant construction industry. Then you have the vehicle and automotive industry, pharmaceuticals, industrial chemicals. This country has about 3 million tons of industrial salt that we can mine. It's called white gold. You'll be surprised that we are mining less than 300, even 300,000 is overstated, less than 200,000 tons out of the three. And every single grain of industrial salt that you produce, Nigeria alone can consume it, because now they have to bring industrial salt from Brazil to feed their petrochemical industry. And even for our petrochemical industry, if you have industrial salt, basically you don't have a problem with market. And also, people don't realize that caustic soda, it also comes from, on all the chloroalkaline industries, all the chemical industries, a lot of them come out of industrial salt. Then garment and textiles, $1 billion industry. And already Ghana has a lot of potential. I mean, maybe one day we'll go on an industrial site visit to one of these companies. It employs at least 1,500 people. They are exporting to Agua. We want to replicate this, and have many more, particularly for the women, garment and textiles. Then vegetable oils and fats, oil palm. Not only oil palm, but including oil palm. You know that Malaysia earns almost $16 billion to $20 billion from oil palm and its derivatives. Only oil palm. We taught Malaysia how to cultivate oil palm. Now we are doing palm nut soup. We are doing this, but we have to move with palm nut soup, and then make sure that, because you see, palm oil is one of the most widely used industrial chemicals. It goes into cosmetics. It goes into so many things. Food and beverage preparations. Industrial starch, the same thing. I think I'm speaking to the convert. You know what industrial starch can do. Right now, the demand for industrial starch that's from cassava in China alone can transform at least half of our rural districts. And what does it take to grow cassava? So that's another pillar for us. And last but not the least, I've talked about it, machinery and equipment manufacturing. So I close just by giving you one example, as always, of what we are doing on strategic anchor industries. You already know, even without spending even one cedi, just like the policy signaling that has come from government. First time record in Africa, all the major automobile companies are already negotiating to establish their presence in Ghana. So it is not just talk. Toyota, Volkswagen, Renault, Nissan, Suzuki, Samsung. So what better testimony can we have about where this country is heading to? If you have all these companies, and by the end of June, they will present their investment plans. And I'm sure you are also aware that Cabinet has approved a new policy for the auto industry. It is because of the quality of our policy that they are all coming. And so this is not talk. And you can see, when executives take photograph with the president, then you know that it is not a fly-by-night activity. So you can see for yourselves. My brothers and sisters, friends from the media, The primary goal underpinning all that I've been talking about, industrial transformation, is to do two things. First, to produce locally, to replace or compete with imports. Those of you who have done basic economics. When we started talking about import substitution and that nobody wants to hear about it, I'll listen to the narrative even in the United States. You want to be able to produce so that you use your own forex expenditure on imports. And beyond that, also to expand our exports to these markets, ECOWAS, the whole continent, CFT, the EU, US, Asia markets, and I believe that once we are able to do this, the benefits are imaginable. Number one, you create decent jobs, primarily in our rural communities, and enhance economic growth. We'll move Ghana beyond aid and create wealth and prosperity in Ghana for Ghanaians. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for that phenomenal presentation. So, Minister, beyond your presentation, I'm certain the media persons may have a question or two. But because of time, and for the fact that I have a very full list, I'll crave their indulgence to ask one question per person. So just as we usually do it, we call your media organization, and if you have a question, you come up front to my left, and then you introduce yourself, your media house, and then put your question through. For the purpose of time, it's one question per head. I hope I don't have to stress this any further. The finder, if you have a question, please come up front. The finder. Radio Gold, if you have a question, please come up front. You have actually taken up the space of our questioners. So if you don't mind, you have to move on so we can carry on quickly. Thank you. City TV, any question from you? Ghana News Agency, any question? Daily Searchlight, Star FM, TV Africa, Day Guide, Class FM, GH1. GH1, any question? Daily Statesman, Kasapa FM, Metro TV, GC Radio, TV3. I think we can begin.
My name is Nashika Caesar. I work with City FM and City TV. Now my question, in terms of job creation, can you give us specific numbers of jobs that have been created in the sector so far? And then the Deputy Minister, Mr. Roberts Ahunkalensi, mentioned on City something like that. Out of the 181 factories under the One District, One Factory project, 114 will be operational before the end of 2019 now. Can you please confirm these? And also if there's been any changes to the numbers. Thank you. Okay. So the second question is that the Deputy Minister, Robert Ahunkalins, mentioned on CFM that about 181 factories under the One District, One Factory budget, 114 will be operational before the end of 2019. Now I want you to confirm this, or if there's been any changes to the numbers.
Thank you. So we will continue with one question per head, and I mean one question per head.
All right.
Thank you.
My name is Eric. I work with Star FM. Now, last year, the Trades Ministry gave some 5 pointers as measures for the textile industry. Here amongst them was a tax stamp, port restriction on textiles, and then tax falls on the Ghanaian market. Particularly for the tax stamp, the Coalition of Textile Workers are raising concerns as that is yet to come into force. So want to know whether that policy, the tax stamp for textiles, when is it coming to force and why the delay? And also the restriction on the import.
You are a gentleman. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Melvin Deligai. I'm interested in knowing, as a state, how much are we giving away in terms of tax incentives and tax holidays to the companies that are taking the 1D1F policy, and in the growth aspect that we are talking about, what sort of growth are we talking about under the 1D1F? Is it an accelerated growth? Is it an inclusive growth? Is it a growth that we can feel in our pockets as a people, or one that the company owners are feeling? Thank you.
My name is Blessed, I work with Glass FM. Honorable Minister, the International Monetary Fund, IMF, has issued a policy statement on the continental free trade area. They claim that any decision by Ghana to proceed with such an agreement will affect earnings and employment opportunities in some sectors of our economy. And that the IMF is saying about the continental free trade area. In fact, it will affect earnings and employment opportunities in some sectors of the economy. And when you look at our counterparts, for instance, Nigeria, they are dragging their feet in going ahead, for instance, to ratify the free trade agreement. Why is Ghana pursuing an agenda which many consider will just give us accolades on the international front and end up killing our local businesses? Thank you.
The minister is here with his team, and just in case he may need some exact figures from any of the representatives, it's okay for him to call them. So, team, I hope everyone is ready and abreast with all the information that may be required.
So, ladies and gentlemen, if I miss out on any point, please draw me back. So the first questioner was quoting my colleague, the Deputy Minister, and I think the number was, did you say 140? 114. Well, we passed that already. If you look at the numbers that I presented, 79 already are operational, correct? So 79. And you have 56 the small-scale processing factories. Is that correct? So you add that. Then you have the 5 common user facilities. And you have the pipeline, the 33 companies in the pipeline with the banks. So that already, if my calculation is right, is over 160. So basically, the numbers even go beyond that. And that's why, I decided that let's give the breakdown. Because if you give breakdown, it is there for you to know which one are under construction, which ones are operational. So, madam, that's the answer. Then the second one was in respect of the textile industry. Yes, they... Oh, how many job creation? Well, I will not get specific here because, as I said, these are private sector promotion and government facilitates. So once we consolidate the employment statistics from all the companies, the business plans, then I don't want to throw this around. Next time, say, my friend, you said that this, when in actual fact, you should not be speaking on behalf of the program. These are not government enterprises. We can collect them once they give us, even if they give us the employment status, we want to audit it, because this is not about politics. Because if you are talking about job creation and the jobs are not there, people will know. But these are not state enterprise where you determine, on a case-by-case how many people are employed. So at the appropriate time, when the private sector, the ballers, and we have audited the employment statistics, we will throw that out. And then the next one is textile industry, the tax stamps. The tax stamps are basically coming from a contract, and we've negotiated that. But the Ministry of Finance, please remember that we are only facilitating and supporting the sector. It's the Ministry of Finance that has responsibility for the issuance of these tax stamps, but working very closely with the Ministry of Finance. And that is why you no longer hear too much noise coming from the sector, because they know that things are already happening. And so that's the answer. And then the tax incentives, the cost. I did mention that, yes, incentives, there are costs to every incentive. But the incentives are a means to an end. The incentives are a means to an end. And so, if, for example, you want to talk about inclusive, you have a comprehensive program. It's not just even the job creation, but look at the spread. Look at all the kinds of things that we are talking about. How more inclusive can you be than the nature, the expansive nature of this program? And because also it's the private sector that is at the center of this. It's not government allocating jobs to people, So I hope you get what I'm saying. That's the whole reason for the design of these projects. And maybe let me also mention that when people start quoting what is happening in other countries, do you know the type of incentives that are offered for them to be, even in terms of export subsidies, for them to compete on the export market? You have no idea. So sometimes let us be also circumspect about giving the impression that all these countries that are basically at the forefront of development, that they provide even more incentives than the developing countries. So we don't have money to afford these incentives. Otherwise, we even do more. Then the CFTA. I'm surprised, and I don't have access to what you are quoting. But if the IMF is saying that the CFTA is going to cause a major challenge for us in terms of job creation, for me, it doesn't add up. This is to be the single most important stimulus for investment in Africa, because everybody is targeting the African market. But if the investor knows that by locating in an African country, he can export duty-free, quota-free, he will bring the investment to the country. So how could that be a disincentive in terms of employment creation? Please check your facts, or ask the IF to check their facts. I'm not sure what you're talking about. Madam, the first round.
Ghanaian Times, Accra FM, Gen TV, Maraba FM, Ghanaian Observer, Atinka TV, Kesben TV, UTV, EBN TV, ITV, Xinhua. Yeah, Xinhua. Okay. Minister, it looks like your your presentation was very detailed. We don't have that many questions coming up. I'm sorry. Please put your...
Thank you very much. My name is Samuel Opoku. I'm from Accra FM. And we would like to know, you made mention on the existing companies that the ministry supports in the one district one factory. Want to know the criteria that the ministry used in selecting those companies, or what qualifies a company, an existing company, to be supported in this one if. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. My name is Justice. I work with the Xinhua News Agency, China. Honorable Minister, you mentioned that some Chinese banks, you are working with some Chinese banks who are ready to support the 1D1F program with about $400 million US. We would like to know which particular banks they are, and then when you expect these, the financial support to be delivered. Then in a related matter, about 3 weeks ago, there was this incident in the eastern region where a Chinese national who was investing in the 1D1F project was actually murdered by armed robbers. We would like to know what kind of security you can guarantee. Yeah, Esuboy, the incident happened in Esuboy. Yeah. What kind of...
Excuse me, sir. There's no information here or evidence that there was a murder and it was linked to 1D and 1F. So I can't accept that question.
All right. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we want to know when you expect that financial support to be delivered and which particular financial institutions these are that are making the promise. Thank you.
Thank you. Since we've exhausted the list that I already have, in case anybody else from the media still has another question, this is the time to come up. I didn't call you. You probably didn't register.
Thank you very much. My name is Ernest Mino. I work with Joy News. My question is on the Commander Sugar Factory. We have been there a number of times. We've done reports. We've spoken to the people. They are willing and eager to work, and I'm talking about the sugarcane plantation, to provide, the resource that we need to get the factory back on stream. Mr. Minister, you were in Parliament a few weeks ago to talk about some evaluation you've done of the company to be acquired by an investor, and that hopefully the company will be revamped and will get back on stream. The minority of the view that the valuation you did was actually a devaluation, and that after 3 years, the company, with all that was invested by the previous administration, shouldn't cost the figure you quoted. Would want to know how you came by that, if there's any explanation, and what is the assurance that the Commander Sugar Factory will actually come back on stream for the people to get jobs and for their plantations?
Good afternoon, sir. My name is Nana Poku from Daily Searchlight. You did mention that some automobile companies are coming to set up their own business in Ghana. And some people in this country are saying that we have already existing automobile company by Apostle Kojo Safo. What are you going to do to him so that he also expands his business and employ Ghanaians, because he is in the automobile industry? Then my second question, if you are a graduate from school and you want to start up your business in the 1 year, one sector, what must you take? Who must you see? Because for all you know, you don't have any business acumen. And besides, they say bring what they call business plan. And very expensive. Sometimes when you contact people, in the range of about millions of dollars. So what do we do as a partner from the university or institution? Thank you.
And your third question?
My name is Chika from City FM, City TV. I want to know how soon the ministry foresees the 1D1F project translating into a reduction of goods we export into the country.
We import into the country.
Imports, yeah. We import into the country. Thank you.
Okay, Eric with Star FM. The bit about the tax stamp, the minister just answered. I didn't quite get. You said you've contacted a contractor who's seen to it coming into being. But I want to know whether there are any timelines with regards to this contractor and when he's bringing in the tax stamp. And then my final question will be the bit of the advertising bill. We know the onset of things. I think early this year, billboards, when it rained, billboard fell on certain individuals in some parts of Kumasi, and the advertising bill is supposed to sanitize the advertising space and that. So how soon is this advertising bill coming into force?
So the first question was with respect of the criteria for the 1D1F companies. Number one, obviously, is location. But I need to qualify this. In terms of branding, we've been talking about one district, one factory. And we've also given a clear indication that our interest is to bring industry to the doorsteps of the average Ghanaian in the rural communities. But it does not exclude peri-urban centers, because there are also districts or municipalities. So in that regard, location, obviously, our preference is in rural districts, but it does not exclude metropolitan centers. So that's number one. Number two is potential for job creation. It does not mean that we will grade them only on the basis of job creation, but it's an important criteria for us. In some communities, a small plant may create only a few jobs, but within the context of that community, it is still adequate for us to consider the company. So it's on a case-by-case basis, but job creation is important. Contribution to export revenue. As much as possible, we are trying to identify projects or enterprises that can help improve our export revenue capacity. And by extension, we are also looking for import substitution companies. So we have a list of all imports that come into the country. We are look at those ones that can easily be replaced, as it were, through the 1D, 1F. So that's another consideration. And then obviously, in terms of adding value to the natural resource endowment of a particular district. So that's the criteria. If you're already in existence and you fulfill these criteria, why not? It's a low-hanging fruit, and we'll work with you. Now, which banks, so that's the second question, which banks are involved in the Chinese facility to support 1D, 1F? Again, this is all private sector interventions, both from the local point of view and the foreign. This is not Chinese government. These are financial institutions, private financial institutions in China, even if they are state-owned. So they themselves have identified banks that they want to work with. Ordinarily, I should not be mentioning the banks, but I think it is useful for people to know. So, for example, GC, Exim Bank, Eco Bank, Stanbic, because they have to be able to determine or define the strength of the balance sheet of the company, of the bank, because they are lending to the local bank for the local bank to on-lend to the 1D, 1F promoters. So the risk attendant to the project is first on the local bank. So if you have a strong balance sheet, it's not likely that they will work with you. But beyond the Chinese facility, we have many other banks, that's local banks, that we are working with. And this facility is only one, I would say, component of the financing portfolio for 1DF. Now, Commander, you're absolutely right. I did not just issue a statement, an update to Parliament. Subsequently, I also put out a response to some of the media reports coming out, Commander. And I want to wait for one thing to happen. Those who are talking, they will stop talking. You go and build a factory, $35 million. That's the valuation. Because it's very easy for us to understand. You borrow 35 million, so the valuation of the company, obviously, which has to be close to 35 million. Now, even those who were bidding at the time that the previous government was trying to, and that's another thing we have to correct. I heard people saying that, oh, the NDC never attempt to, sell and all that. They commissioned the factory in May. In 2 months, they were already selling the factory. They had recruited a transaction advisor to offload 70% of their interest. And the evidence is clear. Those who were even bidding 2 months after that, go and look at the figures they were quoting. Go and look at the figures they were quoting to buy a new factory. And even the one who was supposed to have won the bid, later on the man came and said, oh, the factory is not worth the amount that and he thought that they were going to use that money to recapitalize the business and not to buy and pay for the factory. Subsequently, all the work that has been done, and the people who have expressed interest in Commander said that that factory cannot cost 35 million. And right from that, we've issued a request for, how do you call this, a forensic audit. Now, because of what has come up, I've asked them to accelerate work on the forensic audit. And those who have to answer for how a $35 million facility used to acquire equipment, now suddenly people are quoting and 12 million and, sometimes when you hear some of the quotes, you actually be shocked. So people have to come and explain. You have collected money, state money, and then you've built a factory. Even if you use normal depreciation and normal straight depreciation, even for 5-10 years, it will not devalue by that. So, my brother, let's wait till the forensic audit comes out. People have to answer. 35 million, everybody who comes is saying that this thing cannot cost 35 million. So where did the valuation, the value now, how do we account for that? So that's what and we've put out a statement like that. And remember, this is not about government doing the valuation. There's a transaction advisor, an international company, Pricewaterhouse, that has been involved in this valuation. So at the appropriate time, they have issued the last valuation that they authorized, because 35 million, because of the reports that were made out. I said, no, nobody, you cannot have a situation where everybody is saying this thing cannot cost 35 million. So Pricewaterhouse, do another independent valuation. The valuation was $12 million. And it is consistent with the work that my deputy and the technical team, independent technical team, also did. It was around almost the same figure. So the matter will come up for further discussion. Then Tanka, I think that for me, the real value of this new policy thrust on the automobile sector is not just waiting for the big boys to come from outside Ghana to invest. It is really for Tanka. And it's unfortunate that he has to go through this period of trial, But now that you have a government that appreciates the efforts of local companies, we have put in a policy to make sure that Kantanka not only survives, but will start exporting under this continental trade area to other African countries. That is what it is. So they are going to be the biggest beneficiary. Of course, this is a globally competitive industry. So you necessarily, let's say, deny investors to come into this. And one thing I want to establish, you know, everything produced in Ghana has a premium value, at least in Africa. You know this. When we produce water corned beef in Ghana, those of you who are old enough remember water corned beef. People would buy water corned beef even ahead of buying Exeter, which is globally acclaimed as a market leader. So Ghana, with all our challenges, and Professor Dodu, Executive Director of Ghana Standards, he's even tightening the thing more. You know, so I'm very confident that when we talk about industrial transformation, we already have the brand recognition. And you see, when the cars start rolling out from Ghana, it will not be just made in Ghana, it will compete with any other of these brands globally. So I think that Apostle Safo, the Kantanka brand, you see what benefits they would derive from this. Tax stamps. The general wanted to know, he still wanted to know about it. I said, we don't issue tax stamps. The ministry does not. It is issued by the Ministry of Finance, and I don't want to come and making statements, you know, it's only fair that once you are working with the Ministry of Finance, and I'm aware they are actively working on it, and the textile companies themselves are involved. So I think that once it is completed, they will start rolling out the tax stamps. Advertising bill, I'm pleased to announce that the draft is ready. It's long overdue, but we've reviewed it. It's ready now to go to a cabinet for approval and then to Parliament. Thank you.
So in the tail end of the question time, we were joined by Honorable Red Ahum Kalinsi, Deputy Minister for Industry, right? Deputy Minister for Trade and Industry in charge of industry. You will not use me. Thank you to the Ministry of Trade and Industry, all their representatives from their various agencies and departments for joining us today and sharing with us their key achievements, sharing with us information that Ghanaians have been asking lots of questions about. I'm very certain that our able media persons here with us today will ably share the credible, reliable information that they've had access to today, right from the minister himself. Luckily enough, there were diagrams and there were figures, and as we keep saying, figures and diagrams do not lie. They have a lot of information to refer to be able to report credibly. We are grateful for your time, for your sacrifice, and for everything that you put in to be able to hear, to participate, and to make the program a success. Shall we pray? Father in heaven, we are thanking once again for the end of this successful program. We pray that you will enable our media persons and give them all the grace they need to be able to report accurately to the development of our mother Ghana. Thank you, Father. Amen.